One major irony about all of this is that if Elon Musk is able to buy Twitter, and he is able to make it a truly free platform, this actually screws over Donald Trump. Trump invested a lot of money into Truth Social, and Truth Social has had a pretty rough launch. But the more censorship we see on Twitter, the more likely it is that Trump's Truth Social succeeds. But if Twitter goes totally free speech, Truth Social will probably die. So in a bizarre twist of fate, leftists are helping Trump. Elon Musk's battle to save democracy.
Mr. Reagan.
For years now, people have been setting up a little contest between crypto and gold, but that's like comparing trucks with SUVs. Both carry stuff and both travel from A to B, but they do different jobs. Gold's job is to keep the value of your money safe and to preserve its value. And since Ukraine and the oil and inflation crises, gold has done a brilliant job compared to stocks and other investments. So if you're worried about what's going on right now, and who isn't, just talk to the experts at Noble Gold about precious metals IRAs for your retirement. They'll put you straight on your options and they'll hold your hand through the entire setup process. And this month, for any qualified IRA, you'll get an incredible 3-ounce silver American Virtue coin completely free as a thank you. You know, when they sent me this, they send me coins every once in a while. Valeria flipped out. So far, this is her favorite coin, and I have to say, I agree. This thing is pretty nice. So call 877-646-5347 right now to find out more, or visit noblegoldinvestments.com. That's noblegoldinvestments.com.
As we all watch Elon Musk valiantly battle the evil and corrupt Twitter corporation, a fundamental question has emerged. What is more harmful to society, misinformation or censorship? The answer, as we shall see, is clearly censorship. But before we dive into that, I'd like to explore another question. Why is Twitter fighting Elon Musk so furiously? And is their rejection of his offer even legal? The legal question might strike some of you as odd, since why might a board of directors be legally obliged to sell a company? This is something I was only made aware of a short time ago myself, but apparently company directors are bound by something called fiduciary responsibility. Fiduciary responsibility is a pretty simple concept. Basically, directors of companies represent the shareholders of a company, and so they must act in the best interest of those shareholders. They can't do anything to hurt a company financially, and they must direct the company in ways that are best for the shareholders. Now, Elon Musk's offer to buy out every Twitter share is above the current market price. As I write, the market price is $48.45 per share, and Elon Musk is offering $54.20 per share. To put this into context, the market average through the lifetime of the company is $35.40. Clay Travis put it this way: I'm a longtime Twitter shareholder. Today's actions by the board violate their fiduciary duty to maximize shareholder returns, and if they don't lead to a sale of the company for over $54.20 per share, it will lead to monster lawsuits costing the company billions of dollars. And digital strategist Greg Price wrote, Twitter's insiders essentially just decided to screw over their shareholders, cash their stock, and open the company up to massive lawsuits just to prevent Elon Musk from running Twitter in a way that won't rig elections or censor their political opponents. And so we see here, there is an argument to be made that the board should have to take Musk's offer, as it is in the best interest of the shareholders. This is why Musk added in his letter an indication that he will sell his stock shares if they decline his offer. That basically puts them in a difficult position where if they reject the offer, it would very likely hurt the stock price. And so they're in a position where their fiduciary responsibility requires them to sell.
The board does not own the company. They represent the shareholders. I thought we all knew that. And for them to dismiss this kind of approach in such a short, period of thinking this over, less than 24 hours, and coming out with frankly, a 1980s defense of a poison pill. I mean, right now what they're doing is they're saying, we don't want to entertain his offer, not because the analytics are poor, but we're afraid of what he will do to the company, and he will change the culture of our company. Mm-hmm. To me, that's discrimination. It has no grounds unless you can come in with facts and an analytic hypothesis of why you should reject that offer. This is just more of a legal and ethical matter, and I think we're seeing now that Twitter really needs to be overhauled completely.
I can smell the lawsuits from here, assuming that another suitor doesn't come in with a better offer.
But they're not selling. Instead, they're employing a strategy known as a poison pill in order to thwart Elon Musk's bid to take over the company. Of course, Musk has a plan B, and that plan was cryptically announced in a tweet by Musk, "Love me tender."
He tweeted about a day ago, about 24 hours ago, "Love me tender." And I'm a fan of Elvis. Maybe it's just that. Maybe Musk was just listening to some Elvis tunes on Easter.
This is a reference to what's known as a tender offer, which is essentially the same thing as the buyout he offered the board of directors, but instead of them making the decision is now up to the shareholders themselves. Now, there is some speculation that the board is expecting other offers and is merely playing coy in order to get Musk to increase his offer, but I don't think so. Based on the poison pill plan, it sounds like they're willing to do anything to keep Musk from buying Twitter. But how can they do this? Mustn't they do what's best for the shareholders, legally speaking? Well, the real reason I think that Twitter is so terrified of Elon Musk taking over is that Musk will almost certainly expose Twitter's blacklists and shadow banning algorithms, as well as policies within the company to try to censor conservatives and sway elections. And he may even expose Twitter's relationships with government entities like the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, and the White House. And some of this stuff might actually cross the line into illegality. And so that's the real reason I think that they're panicking. But of course, they're never going to say this publicly. This is obviously not an appropriate argument for the board to defy their fiduciary duty. So how can they legally justify rejecting the Elon Musk offer? Well, some have argued that this poison pill strategy is not an outright rejection, and therefore they may not have breached their fiduciary responsibilities. Now, I'm not a corporate lawyer, and so I don't know if that's true or not, but what I do know is that this doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense that a board would be so bitterly against this offer. Elon Musk isn't trying to kill Twitter, he's trying to make it better. Somebody else on Twitter said that he believes that the board cannot be found to be in breach of their duties because Elon's price was too low, considering that Twitter's highest price per share historically was $77.06. And honestly, that might be right. I don't have the expertise to assess what would be considered financially sensible or irresponsible in this case. But a lot of people are saying that rejecting the offer is indeed irresponsible. But the truth is that the people at Twitter just want to keep censoring conservatives. That's it. They are so committed to the censorship of conservatives that they're willing to destroy Twitter rather than to allow conservatives to speak freely. These people know that controlling social media means controlling the flow of information in society. And if they control information, they control elections. This is all about controlling elections. In any case, I suspect that the board has gotten a few calls from the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, and the White House, and the people on the other end of those calls, I imagine, are not being particularly gentle with their words. But those on the board and the government agencies aren't the only ones criticizing this buyout. The general public is also against it. The mainstream media is totally against it. And one might say, well, that makes sense. Elon Musk wants to let conservatives speak freely, and leftists are enjoying the silence of conservatives right now, so of course they are against this buyout. But this is a really extreme view. This contradicts a fundamental right enshrined in the First Amendment of the Constitution. I mean, how have Democrat voters and the media been convinced that silencing political opposition is justifiable? And I know some of you out there are shouting, because Democrats are evil. And sure, okay. But that doesn't actually explain it, because even evil people think that they're good. And these evil people who think that they're good, they won't usually do something that they can't justify to themselves as good. So what is this justification? How have they been convinced that silencing political opposition is okay? Well, to answer this, I think we have to dig down and answer a more basic philosophical question, a question I asked at the top of the show. What is more dangerous, misinformation or censorship? Well, Democrat voters and the mainstream media have all been convinced that the greater evil is misinformation. They're convinced that what they perceive to be lies by Republicans and Trump supporters in particular are so dangerous that regulating the speech of these dangerous people is actually a good thing. Of course, this is wrong on many levels, but for now, let's stick with the big picture. Let's answer that philosophical question. The answer, of course, is that censorship is far more dangerous than misinformation. Misinformation can be corrected with the truth. Censorship cannot. And it's very clear throughout history that censorship has caused much more damage. The first problem with censorship is that those doing the censoring are not always right. If the idea is that misinformation should be censored, well then in order for that censorship to be effective, those doing the censoring would have to be right 100% of the time. With social media in the past few years, we've seen that this is clearly not the case. Not only that, but I'd say that they're actually wrong more often than they're right. And if fact checkers and administrators are censoring good information more often than they're censoring bad information, well, then they're actually doing the opposite of what they're supposedly intending to do. They're creating more of a problem than if they were never there. Now, in a system in which there are no censors, the arguments can be fought out in the marketplace of ideas. The truth has a good chance of being accepted by society. But when somebody's ideas are blocked out, the society has no choice but to accept whatever information they're being given. And if the censor makes a mistake, there's no way of fixing that problem. No other ideas are allowed. Also, censorship can be abused. Not only can censors be wrong, but they can be corrupt. If those who control the censors, the fact checkers, the administrators, etc., if those who control these people decide that they want the public to believe a certain lie, well, they can instruct these gatekeepers to shut out all messages opposing this lie. They can literally censor the truth. And that, I think, is what's going on now. This is what we call disinformation. And disinformation, I think, is far more dangerous than misinformation. While misinformation is an accidental expression or an advocation of something that is not true, a mistake, disinformation is the intentional expression or advocation of something that is not true, a lie. When disinformation is promoted by the government or another large organization, we tend to call this propaganda. It is far more insidious and, again, far more dangerous than misinformation. But I think this can also be combated. Some might feel like disinformation would be more reasonable to regulate. And yeah, I think in some ways it is. I mean, we do have laws against slander and libel, for instance. However, laws against disinformation can also be abused simply by labeling the truth disinformation. We've seen this happen a lot in recent years, the most famous case being the Hunter Biden laptop being characterized as Russian disinformation. Now, during the pandemic, Democrat voters were convinced that silencing conservatives was the right thing to do because of COVID disinformation. They believed that conservatives were intentionally spreading lies about COVID, like the idea that the virus came from the lab in Wuhan instead of a wet market, as was reported. Conservatives were questioning the efficacy of masks, the possibility of existing treatments, the side effects of the vaccines. These were all reasonable things to question. But Democrat voters were convinced that anything short of total acceptance of the vaccines, of the masks, or of the lockdowns was a danger to public health. And so leftists came to believe that it was best to trade our freedom for public safety. But the truth is, they didn't trade our freedom for safety. They've traded our freedom for the illusion of safety. Now, I won't get into the efficacy of the masks or the vaccines here. You all know how the virus affects young, healthy people. And I just did a video on how some people appear to have natural immunity even without ever having contracted COVID at all. And if you've not seen that video, by the way, I highly recommend it. But the political dichotomy in America has now developed in such a way that conservatives believe in speech and Democrats believe in censorship. And we are therefore in a situation in which leftist control of social media platforms is great for leftists and terrible for conservatives. But conservative control of social media platforms is great for everyone. This is not debatable. This is logical. If leftists demand the censorship of conservatives and conservatives demand freedom for all, then conservatives are the only ones capable of controlling social media in an ethical way. Period. Now, leftists have two arguments against this, and both of these arguments are terrible. The first argument is similar to the public health argument about COVID disinformation. They argue that some ideas are particularly dangerous, and so we have to hide these ideas from the virgin ears of innocent leftists on social media. They pretend like every conservative idea is somehow going to lead to the mass lynching of black men or the genocide of all gays or something like that. This is insane. Conservative ideas are not dangerous. The truth is that the only danger conservative ideas pose is a danger to leftist ideas, because conservative ideas are better. And yes, that danger does exist. Sorry, but that's the way ideas work. The best ideas win out. And they need to win out. That's the very definition of progress, a concept that you'd think progressives would be all for. But we all know that progressive is a total misnomer. They also argue that censorship is needed because conservatives tend to harass leftists online. This is laughable. The truth is that conservatives are harassed far more online than leftists. Consider this Pew study from 2021. Republicans actually reported being harassed more often than Democrats, despite Democrats responding that such harassment was, quote, a major problem in much higher numbers than conservatives. So the group that's being harassed less often is the group who thinks that harassment is a major problem. You know what that tells me? That tells me that Democrats are way more sensitive than Republicans. And maybe they just need to grow a pair. More importantly, it suggests that the incidents of harassment are going to be overreported by Democrats and underreported by Republicans. And so the harassment against conservatives is probably far worse than this Pew study indicates. My speculation here is actually supported by another study conducted by Facebook of their own, quote, race-blind algorithm. Some time ago, Facebook introduced a so-called race-blind hate speech algorithm intended to remove hate speech from the platform. Upon reviewing the effect of this algorithm, Facebook discovered that 90% of the hate speech on the platform was directed toward white people and men. 90%. 9-0. I mean, I know I reported this in another video before, but it's still shocking to me. Facebook subsequently modified this algorithm, and I'm not joking, to allow hate speech against white people and men. Apparently, we're not oppressed enough to be protected from hate speech. Everybody else is, but not white people and not men. I mean, I'm not for censorship, but protecting black people, Hispanics, Asians, and specifically excluding white people, that kind of thing is usually referred to as racism. Now, I will say that the harassment of leftists surely does happen sometimes, but as I've illustrated, it's far more common the other way around. The reason why I think there might be a misperception about this in society, aside from the obvious lying by the mainstream media, is that conservatives don't tend to complain about online harassment, even if it's extreme, while leftists are, as I indicated earlier, much more sensitive, and they seem to interpret all kinds of things as harassment. They've even created a term for some of these invented abuses. Microaggressions. If you call somebody by the wrong pronoun, it's harassment. If you wear dreadlocks, it's cultural appropriation. If you suggest that maybe the reason that there are fewer girls in STEM is because they don't like it as much as boys, well, you are a sexist. And look, I'm all for protecting people from real harassment, but protecting people from harassment and censoring the ideas of conservatives are totally separate things. Referring to somebody by the wrong pronoun is not harassment. Saying that the 2016 Ghostbusters movie was terrible, for which Milo Yiannopoulos was banned from Twitter, is not harassment. Reporting about Hunter Biden's laptop is not dangerous disinformation. However, conservatives are constantly harassed on Twitter, genuinely harassed. And there are zero consequences for the leftists who harass them. And I'd say that the leftists over at YouTube who are shadow banning my conservative channel, well, that's a particularly sinister kind of harassment. And cancel culture is certainly a kind of targeted harassment, and cancel culture is purely a leftist phenomenon. Harassment is not about political opinions. It's about trying to hurt someone. And sure, there are probably some conservative 13-year-old 8chan punks on Twitter who harass leftists sometimes, but you've got blue-checked grown adults on the left who harassed 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse and 16-year-old Nicholas Sandmann. And these people have never been censored, they've never been suspended, they've never been banned. Look, we all know this has always been just an excuse to censor conservatives. And so these idiotic arguments of the left are, as I said, terrible. Censorship is far worse than misinformation. But the leftists controlling social media, they don't care. They don't care about morality, they don't care about reason. All they care about is helping their side win, no matter how destructive that is for democracy. And it is destructive. This kind of censorship is a cancer, and if it's not removed, it will kill our democracy. And that is why Elon Musk must take over Twitter. One major irony about all of this is that if Elon Musk is able to buy Twitter, and he is able to make it a truly free platform, this actually screws over Donald Trump. Trump invested a lot of money into Truth Social, and Truth Social has had a pretty rough launch. But the more censorship we see on Twitter, the more likely it is that Trump's Truth Social succeeds. But if Twitter goes totally free speech, Truth Social will probably die. So in a bizarre twist of fate, leftists are helping Trump. In closing, I'd like to say that I did ask my Twitter followers what they thought the consequences could be if it's found that the Twitter board of directors has in fact defied their fiduciary responsibilities by rejecting Elon Musk's offer. And sadly, most speculated that there wouldn't be any consequences at all. These Twitter directors are, after all, Democrats. Now, I'm less cynical than most of my Twitter followers, but even I think they're probably right. Well, that's it for me. And remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant. It's just that they know so much. That is not so. Good night.
You know, someone very profoundly once said that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism. And what is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, but total government control and regulation. Well, isn't this the liberal philosophy? The conservative, so-called, is the one that says, less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.